So now I would just like all of the speakers to come on stage by turning their camera on and just introduce yourselves one by one. Give us a 2-minute overview of what you do, why you're here, we'll be talking about.
How should we start? I guess I volunteered myself. Right.
Yep.
You can do that. Go ahead, Dom.
Great.
Minutes, and then we will continue with Diana and Adriana third.
Okay, excellent. Hi everyone, my name is Dominic and I'm the Director of Precious Plastic Bangkok. And we've been running now for about 2.5 years. And our whole objective is to make recycling as easy and affordable as possible for as many different individuals and communities across the world. So wherever you are, whether you live in Bangkok or you live on an island, we want to give you the tools to start recycling plastic pollution that's literally sitting on your doorstep. And so I'll be talking a little bit about what we do as an individual workshop, but also our grander plans in terms of scaling up our projects so that we can maximize the potential of Bangkok and Thai communities to recycle plastic waste within their own communities. Thank you very much.
And Adriana, could you mute your mic when you're not speaking for us?
Okay, Adriana, do you want to go ahead since your mic is on?
Okay, all right. I thought you were going next, but I'm happy to go next. Actually, I'm not going to talk about plastics. I know you want to talk about plastics, but I don't think I have anything to add. I'm going to talk about strategy. This whole event is around ideas and plastics, and while execution is king of ideas, we still need strategy. Is there a difference between execution and strategy? Probably. So really, for me, the whole point is that I've got nothing to add to the plastic conversation, but I think I've got plenty to talk about when we think about strategy and strategy in regards to behaviour change and really what we're trying to achieve in the circular economy.
Thanks. And hi, everyone. My name's Diane Archer. I'm a research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute Asia office, which is based in Bangkok. And I have a background in urban community development and urban climate change resilience research. And as part of that, I'm very interested in more inclusive and equitable urban areas and cities. And I think a very important group of people within the city are the informal waste workers who often, for example, in the case of Thailand, are leading on the recycling front. And without them, there wouldn't really be very much recycling happening at all. So in today's presentation, I'll be sharing some findings from a study we carried out with UNESCAP on the role and the contribution of informal waste workers, some of the challenges they face, and how we need to modify and adapt current waste management systems in order to improve the level of recycling of plastics as well as of other materials. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so as I explained, Precious Plastic Bangkok, we are just one chapter in a global movement that's trying to make plastic recycling as easy and as affordable as possible for as many different communities around the world as possible. And it was all started by Dave Hackens from the Netherlands. And his whole concept was that this would be an open source project. So anyone can download the plans for the machines for free from their website and can just start their own chapter, their own workshop, wherever they are in the world, and start recycling plastic. And so that's really the beauty of this whole project, is that it's trying to make it as affordable, simple to build, and as customizable as possible, depending on the needs of your individual community or the individual needs of, say, a school or a city block or something like that. So that's the sort of message that we want to try and drive behind precious plastic. And I think that's a really important idea to take forward with any sort of plastic recycling or waste collection method or system, is trying to make it as adaptable and as translatable for that community as possible. So we can go to the next slide, please. So precious plastic really is built around these core machines that you see in front of you now. The shredder is the backbone of any precious plastic workshop. This allows us to grind and almost eat up the plastic into small flakes, which can then be melted in our range of other machines. So we have an extruder, we have an injector and a compressor, and these allow us to make different product forms, depending on the needs of the community or the needs of the individual. And this is what precious plastic is all about, is giving the tools themselves to the communities to allow them to be inspired, to feel empowered, to be part of this solution, rather than just an afterthought of some official or formalized waste management system. We want to give them the actual means to create something new, something exciting, something beautiful, perhaps, from plastic pollution and waste that was literally lying on their doorstep. So we can go to the next slide, please. So this next slide will, sorry, it's gone the wrong way. So this is just one small product here, for example, is a small plant pot. You've also got some there on the slide there that show maybe the versatility of the technology, allowing us to make some quite beautiful shapes, as I dare say myself. So we've got also bowls and also these coasters that were very nice. These are a partner from Chiang Mai that make these coasters. And so really what we're doing at the moment is barely scratching the surface of what is possible in terms of using plastic trash to create something that actually has tangible value and useful purpose as well. So you'll see there's a face shield that's been made from our plastic waste. And that's a partnership that we're developing with the Thai design company Quali to see if we can make face shields and other COVID-19 related items that maybe aren't using virgin plastic. Because I think that's a fear that is steadily growing, is all of this new normal, the horrible new term that everyone's having to throw around now. With this new normal, we're now having to adapt and use all of these single-use items such as face masks and face shields. And our question is, how can we use more recycled plastic to make sure that that impact is minimized? So we can go to the next slide. So in terms of our objectives, really, as a community, as a workshop, we are really trying to accomplish three different things. The first of these is to build new workshops in communities so that they can respond to the plastic pollution problem themselves. So what we want to do is build workshops such as you see in front of you now, this very nice illustration where waste goes in one window and products come out the other. And what these workshops aim to provide are three core benefits. One, they help to clean up the local natural environment. Two, they inspire local people to see recycling in a different light, hopefully. And three, they provide real economic benefits to the local community through the products that they produce that they can then sell on through their community as well. So we could go to the next slide, please. The next way we're doing this is through our school outreach program. And so pre-COVID, we were quite successful in reaching out to a lot of the international schools, primarily first, just to test the waters with this and really engage the kids in these workshops, allow them to see the process of the recycling from the plastic bottle itself to the grinding machine to the extruder, and actually be able to make a product that they can actually hold in their hand within 15 minutes of it being trash. And I think that's a really nice illustration of what precious plastic is capable of. And it's something that we'd want to try and take forward with as many different schools, and especially Thai schools as well in the near future. So we can go to the next slide, please. And the next way that we're working with schools is also through this drop-off scheme. So getting the kids and the students to feel that they're part of this project by getting them to drop off plastic to their local school or their local community center, and almost incentivizing this sense of competition amongst the students to see which boarding house or which class can collect the most plastic, for example. And there's some really nice creative ways that the students have got involved in painting their containers. And I think what this also helps is to almost reinforce this message of what recycling is, getting them to feel that this solution rather than just, again, like this afterthought of maybe just putting the waste in a trash can and that's the last time you're ever going to see it. So that's what we're trying to do with the schools as well. And then finally, on the next slide, please. We also have a drop-off network that we've developed across the city. And this is all about trying to make recycling as convenient for Bangkokians as possible. Because that's obviously one of the things that we don't have in Bangkok is a formalized recycling system, or it might be very localized in one soi or one street, for example. So what we want to try and do through our currently 32 drop-off locations and growing is to allow people, when they go to visit their local cafe or their favorite coffee shop, they can take their plastic caps and also their takeaway food containers as well now, and drop those off at the same time. And then those containers, those lids will then be picked up by our team and then taken back to our workshop to be actually effectively and responsibly recycled. And so really what we're trying to do is not only expand our workshop capability to communities, but also try to empower as many different individuals and different communities as possible across the city so that they actually feel that they're part of the solution. And one thing I would add about precious plastic, as you saw with our machines, they're not exactly industrial scale. And what I would say is that they're not going to solve Bangkok's waste problem overnight, for sure, and probably not going to make a dent in the amount of plastic that's being produced either. But what they do provide is an important educational tool to hopefully inspire those communities to see plastic trash in a different light. So not just see it as trash that's lying on the street there, but as an incredibly important and valuable resource that's too precious to throw away. So that's really the core message that we want to drive behind the machines. And I think that's probably the more important takeaway to take from precious plastic. So we can go to our final slide, please. So this is just in conclusion, really, looking at the broader scheme of things across Thailand and maybe Southeast Asia as well, is looking at other policies and other sort of mechanisms that we can drive forward and push our governments towards that can really minimize the impact that single-use plastics can have. So banning unnecessary single-use plastics such as styrofoam and other single-use masks and single-use straws and things like that. Making sure that cities and municipal authorities use a standardized waste disposal system, but also driving this awareness and this attachment of value to plastic trash, rather than just seeing it as something that's something that you can just throw away. And then, as I think a lot of people have already been discussing, how can we better design our products so that we can achieve this circular economy? So that middle picture is quite important, those bottle caps. This is something that we've come across, is that bottle caps often have silicone inside them that's been superglued or permanently attached. And that makes them very, very difficult for us to recycle because the silicone doesn't actually melt at the same temperature as plastic. So that whole batch of plastic, whether it's the white caps there or the yellow caps, can actually be completely tainted and completely unrecyclable afterwards. So what we're trying to call on is for those drinks manufacturers, bottle manufacturers, to better design their products so that silicone is easier separated. And so that's just one small illustration of how we can drive this push for a circular economy. So I think that probably wraps up my time there. If you go to the next slide, we've got our Facebook information and our email, just in case anyone wants to get in touch with us. We invite designers to get in touch with us as well. So yeah, thank you very much.
So now you can turn your camera off, mic as well. And I would like to bring another speaker to stage. So Diana, if you could turn your camera and microphone on.
Yep. I think it's great to start with an example of a concrete solution that also allows local communities to play a role in deciding how to use the plastics to produce new products that they can then generate an income from. While I wait for my slides, the presentation today I'm giving is based on a report called the Closing the Loop study, and specifically a case study of Sai district. Bangkok is split into 50 districts, so this is just a very small part of the whole city, but it gives us a nice insight into the role that informal waste workers play in waste collection in a part of Bangkok, and we can use that to try and estimate their overall impact on the city. So if I could please have my first slide. Great. The Closing the Loop study was carried out in Sai in Bangkok, and there was also another case study in Pune in India, where informal waste workers have successfully organized into a cooperative where they work with the municipality to perform waste collection services for the municipality in certain parts of the city. In Thailand, more generally, informal waste workers are quite disparate and not organized as yet. Though there are networks that support informal workers in Thailand, such as HomeNet. And this slide here shows the various types of recycling practices that happen. So in the top left corner is the municipal waste workers, who they themselves will sort through household waste to identify recyclable materials, which they can then sell on as a source of extra income. So it's not a formal part of the municipal waste collection service. Below that is a picture of a landfill site where people can access and sort through the waste to identify any recyclable materials that they can take to sell on to recycling shops and waste dealers. Such as, for example, in the bottom right-hand photo, someone is taking a collection of, I guess, plastic bottles to be sold at a junk shop. And the top right-hand corner is a typical waste collector, recyclable material collector that we'll see in Bangkok. We call them salengs. They have often a motorized cart, and they go from house to house buying waste materials off households. So for example, they'll buy your old newspapers off you, or your old plastic bottles, cardboard, etc. They often also go directly to office buildings or apartment buildings where they can buy materials in bulk. Next slide, please. So this is a chart that comes from the study which we carried out with SCAP support. And essentially it's just to give an overview of the municipal waste system in Thailand, or in Bangkok at least, and the potential places where waste might leak out of the system and end up as pollution, whether it's on land or in rivers or in the sea. So we can see that the green box at the top is process led by the municipality, but the garbage collection crew will do their own recycling of the waste. And then the 4 boxes below that are all essentially informal, voluntary processes of recycling, whether residents themselves bring their own materials to sell directly to a junk shop, or they sell to informal waste buyers or waste pickers in the street, who then sell these materials on to earn an income. So at all stages of these processes, there are opportunities for waste to leak out, because not all waste materials are valuable enough to be worth collecting and selling on for recycling. And this is one of the challenges for the plastic sector in particular. Next slide, please. So I was asked to just give a slight overview of the type of plastic waste. So this comes from our study. And as you can see, the majority is HDP and LDP, so plastic bottles and plastic bags, essentially. But the tricky thing is plastic bags are not quite so valuable for waste pickers. And so they often very much generate the problem in terms of pollution. And then there's, of course, all the food wrappers, and we live in Thailand. There's very much a culture of street food and people buying takeaway food to eat at home, and that often comes in food plastic bags. So you'll have your noodle soup in one bag, and then the noodles in another bag, and then the sauces in another bag, and then all of that comes in another plastic bag. So a simple meal can generate 4 or 5 different pieces of plastic bag, which are then contaminated with food waste and not really a high priority for recycling at all. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the findings from our study. So essentially what we did was we tried to enumerate the quantity of waste that was being collected in total in Saibai district, so 14,000 tons per year. Sorry, that's plastic waste collected in Saibai district. And this is, as you can see, is quite a small proportion when you think about the amount of waste collected per day across all of Bangkok, which is 10,000 tons. So in one district, we're collecting about 14,000 tons a year. In the whole of Bangkok, we're generating about 10,000 tons per day. So there's still a scale problem, but of course, not all of those 10,000 tons of waste daily are recyclable. A lot of it is, for example, food waste, which could actually be composted. But again, there are no formal mechanisms in terms of sorting household compostable waste. But what we did was we tried to calculate or estimate what these plastic waste collected by informal workers and informal systems help to save in terms of avoided CO2 emissions. So around 21,000 tons of avoided CO2 emissions. And importantly as well for the municipality, if we're trying to make a case for promoting more recycling, it saves them about 10 million baht a year in avoided waste management costs. And so if we scaled this up across 50 districts, that's about 500 million baht a year that could be saved in waste management costs. Obviously, these are estimates based on the research, and it's very hard as well for us to get an accurate picture of exactly how many people are working as informal waste pickers, because it's not a homogeneous group, and some people might do it on a on-off basis to supplement their income, whereas others might do it as their full-time job. But this gives us an approximation and a justification for the value of continuing plastic waste recycling in particular. Next slide, please. But of course, there remain quite a few challenges in the process of recycling and the ways of working and recognition that informal waste workers have. So, for example, at the moment, there is no system of registering or recognizing the informal waste workers, and they're often looked down upon as well because they might look through rubbish bins on the street and people consider them as creating mess because this means that they might rip open bin bags, for example. So there's a need as well to raise awareness among the general population of the value performed through this informal waste collection. Of course, they also lack a lot of health and safety equipment, and this is something that's also becoming more important in the age of COVID, where we're concerned about contaminated waste and people are being encouraged to throw their used masks in a separate bin bag to the normal household waste, for example. But even then, there are issues of, for example, broken glass, hazardous waste, and so on. So there are lots of protection issues as well, and dangers faced by informal waste workers. At the household level as well, I think there's still a lot that can be done to encourage people to separate their waste and to consider recycling. Just for example, even if you didn't sell your household waste to the informal waste collectors who come to buy materials off you, you could already start by separating your cardboard and dry recyclable waste, plastic bottles, paper, cardboard, cans, etc., glass. Keep those in a separate bin bag to your everyday household waste, and that will already make the job of the municipal waste pickers a lot easier, because they don't need to sort through your rubbish to identify the recyclable materials. Another challenge that is faced by informal waste workers as well is where to store their materials when they collect recyclables. So they might want to wait a few days for a good price in terms of the going rate for selling plastic to a junk shop. But if they've got nowhere to store lots of plastic bottles, that means they have to sell it to the junk shop on a daily basis, and that gives them very little room for negotiation. So can we identify spaces where the recyclable materials can be sorted but also stored safely until it's a good time for these materials to be sold on by the waste collectors? In certain countries, there have been initiatives to organize waste pickers in cooperatives or to register them, for example. Obviously, this also depends on what the waste pickers would like themselves and whether they see any benefit to this and to being recognized. But for a start, if we could increase the recognition of the work they do, provide them with the appropriate safety equipment to ensure that they're working in safe conditions, then that would be a great start as well to improve their working conditions and thus their ability to collect more waste and to help to reduce the pollution problem. And I think in the longer term, we do need to think about how these informal systems can better integrate with the formal systems of management, because there are also dangers, for example, if we switch to systems where there is a formal recycling process at the household level, then the informal waste pickers will then lose their stream of income. So how do we manage for such a transition in a way that doesn't end up with the exclusion of certain population groups within the city? And on that note, I think that's my final slide. So I think I'll just end by saying that you can read the full report either on the SEI website or the UNESCAP website. You can also download the Pune report, and we also produced a summary report which had recommendations for all of the cities in the Asia Pacific region about how to better close the loop in terms of plastic recycling, but also achieve more inclusive urban economies. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Diana. It was great to hear a really good informal waste recycling sector. We have linked the report in the general chat, so participants can click there and they will be redirected to Stockholm Environmental Institute page. I really encourage you guys to read the report, because it not only gives you a perspective of quantitative but also qualitative research and an overview of the whole problem of segmentation of these two sectors that could actually be working together, the informal and the formal sector, and the scale at which currently the waste is being collected. So, and also at the end, you have the recommendations from Diana and I imagine a group of researchers, and they're really, really interesting and can guide you through the problem. I would like to bring on stage Adriana, and she will be sharing more about. So you're participating in Circular Innovation Jam. And as Adriana said, maybe something I should have mentioned before, she has a very firm stand on plastics. And what you will hear is a more systemic approach and a question for us all of how we can make it truly circular. So not only with plastic material, but overall. So Adriana, I welcome you on stage. We can see you, we can hear you, I think, and you can share your slides with us.
Okay, so I'm just waiting for the share screen to kick into
Upload.
action. I'm not sure why it doesn't want to. Okay, here we go.
While it's loading, you can also just tell participants a little bit about your background story. It's a really interesting journey that you had in Asia and what you're doing now with the Circular Economy Asia.
Oh, okay. So actually, my life story is very boring, but I've been hanging around Asia for quite some time. I worked in the food industry for many years, and first in food importation in Korea, and then food regulation in Thailand, covering 24 countries in Asia. And then I decided to take on a hobby, which was the operational infrastructure design for recyclable resources. I like to speak a different language to the words recycling. I like to call it a resource, recyclable resource. I don't like the word recycling. I like to use the word reprocessing. It sounds more of an action word. And I definitely do not like the word informal sector or informal waste pickers. I think that that language marginalizes, we maintain the marginalization. I like the word resource recovery agents. Respect the work that they do and not maintain the old language from the old linear economy, but work towards a circular economy where we also speak a different language. But that's my little bit on plastics, because quite frankly, I'm not here to talk about plastics. In fact, I don't even think I have anything to add to the plastics conversation. There's been thousands of people around the world over many years who have been talking about the plastics problem, both anti-plastics and pro-plastics and everything in between. Millions of words have been written and tens of millions of images have been displayed around the world, all talking about plastics. So people with a lot more credentials than me have been speaking about plastics. So for me, actually, the problem isn't the plastics, and it's more the people. But then really, we talk about strategy. So that's really what I want to talk about here today. I want to talk about a strategy instead of plastics, because strategy is going to be key to what we do about the circular economy, and in particular plastics and reprocessing and resource recovery agents. So every goal requires a strategy. So many of the things that this Circular Innovation Jam will be talking about is about ideas, the execution of those ideas. So the question is execution of an idea and strategy the same? And I don't think it is. So strategy is absolutely really key to everything that we do in regards to transitioning to the circular economy. So it doesn't matter what you're focused on, whether you're focused on plastics, whether you're focused on reprocessing collection systems or reprocessing facilities, or whether you're focused on circular business models. It absolutely does not matter, because here's the bottom line. 80% of all strategies fail. Now, this is a slide not from me. This is a slide from one of my most favorite companies in the world called Explain, an American visual communications company. And whereas they talk about corporate strategies, the truth is that 80% of all strategies fail. And just in the US alone, $38 billion is spent annually on strategy consulting. So when we think about the strategies that the world has used in regards to the plastics issue, we can see that we've failed. The environmental movement has been very active for at least the last 60 years and has spent trillions and trillions of dollars in what they consider education and awareness as being the keys. And yet we have an ocean full of plastic. So clearly, whereas we have a highly educated population globally around the world, and I have surveyed hundreds of people across Malaysia and Singapore in regards to their understanding. I don't believe we need to spend one more cent in regards to education and awareness. I think that your average person is very aware of the issues. And we can talk about infrastructure and we can talk about lots of things, but we still need a strategy, and that is really the key component. So when we think about the world, you know, we really want to transition, you know, millions and millions and millions of people. So the challenge is that, and according to Explain, because this is there, and I absolutely agree with this rule, that in 100%, you have 20% of people who will agree. So that's a pretty general number. And then you have 20% of the population who won't agree. And then you have 60% of the population who sit on the fence. So when we think about the 8 billion people who currently reside on the planet, we have 80%, which is 6.4 billion people on the planet that we have to shift to different behaviours. And it seems like an incredibly overwhelming task. When we think about Thailand, a country of approximately 70 million people, 80% is 56 million people, or the middle 60% who sit on the fence, because are we going to invest our time and energy in 20%? So 60% of the people who sit on the fence, it's 42 million people. And they're the people we really need to consider about how we're going to engage and how we're going to shift it, because if you can convert these 60%, then you can convert them to those 20%, and then the 80-20 rule shifts. Now, this is easy to do, perhaps it's easier in a company or a corporation because you have people in a space that you can get to. In bigger areas, it can be perhaps a little bit more challenging, but the principles remain the same, regardless of what you do. So the solution is strategy activation. And there are 3 steps, and within each of these 3 steps, there are 3 components. Now, communication, believing, learning, and embedded experience. And learning, even though they say here is the awareness, it's about shifting. You remember, you're shifting 60% of the people that are in your street, your town, your village, your region. So you have to be able to communicate in such a way that shifts the dial into getting them to understand, not what the problem is, because they already know what the problem is, but to shift to an understanding that their behaviour is going to be part of the new norm. To be able to do this, you need to set yourself a baseline and you need to set targets. So let's say, and I've been reading some of the, Lipa sent me a great set of slides, and one of the things that I read on the slides was the frustration that people felt that people were dumping rubbish into a river. So here were people cleaning up the river, and then it was constantly being, you know, fed with new rubbish from people who were just driving up and dumping rubbish in the river. So let's say, as an example, you have about 100 people who come to this river every week to dump in rubbish. And you decide to have a target that you will convert 25% of those people to stop dumping their plastic rubbish. And so you begin to, your strategy now is to a communication campaign, because you haven't got them to believe it yet, or to live it, you just need them to listen. So you set your target, and your target is 25% in 3 months. I'm being very general here. This is a hypothetical situation. And in 3 months' time, you realise that you haven't hit your target. You've only hit 10%. Well, that's some success. So what you've done now is actually understood that some of your communication strategies are working and some of your communication strategies aren't. Now, let's go back to those 100 people. Do you think that a one-size-fits-all type of communication is going to work for all 100 people? The generally accepted behaviour strategies these days is where we put people into groups. So you talk to these 100 people, and not all together, probably over a period of time, and let's say you group them, and you decide anything under 3 is too small, so anything over 5 is too many. So let's say you come up with 5 different types of groups of people. And then your strategy can be around, a communication strategy can be around targeting those 5 different groups of people in regards to how they hear your message. So it's because you can't have a one-size-fits-all communication strategy. You know, this whole idea that if I educate you, you're going to be aware, and that awareness will automatically change your behaviour, hasn't, and we need to move away from this kind of generalisation that education and awareness campaigns are key. So you have your 5 groups of people, you've worked out your 5 different communication strategies, and they don't have to be wildly different. But these are ways to be able to directly connect with people, different groups of people who exist in our society, and then get them to acquire the skills and what they need to learn or to internalize, where they begin to believe your message. We talk about very generally about behaviour change and consumers, but I think that we're really missing the keys within companies. Companies generate an enormous amount of waste, and if you can get behaviour change within companies, remember, people who work in companies are also consumers who go home. We like to target schools because we think that if we change students, that they will go home and they will change the future. I'm not a big fan of that. Yes, we do need environmental education in schools, but the problem is that when these children are let out of school and they go out into society, not as adults, but when they go out into society as children, they often go into homes where the behaviour is not reinforced, or they often go out into societies where the behaviour isn't reinforced. It's only within the school place where we have that. So I think we're missing a lot of opportunity within companies. So you create strategies, you set targets, and you place people in groups so that you can have specific messaging. Now, I'm not giving you very much detailed information because actually most of this is covered in some of our courses. I've set up we have a circular skills website, circularskills.org website, and all of it's covered in Waste as a Resource. It's all free. There are 28 lessons, and you can access a lot of the information that I've just been talking about through this website. In addition, we have the 9 steps towards a circular business, and step 1 is circular systems, because really we work within a system. Unfortunately, there's still only step 1 that's uploaded. I still have the other 8 steps to create for this particular category. I'm working on that, but I've got a lot of other things to do, so I don't often get the time to be able to finish everything that I need to. But more importantly, what we're doing right now is actually building a Circular Economy Foundation course. And the reason why, and it's only got, there's going to be more lessons, it's not quite finished yet. The Circular Economy Foundation course will also include I forget now, it just escaped me, a cradle to cradle and life cycle assessment. So there's lots of things in it. But the key is that we talk about the linear economy. We talk about the take, make, waste linear economy. And it's really a very, you know, it's just a concept. All the things that made up the linear economy that came from the Industrial Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution actually took about 200 years to go from zero to the society that we have today. So it wasn't a quick thing. It evolved over time. And there were key elements. And those key elements are energy, technology, and social change. And all those key elements are the same elements that make up that will make up the circular and sustainable economy that we are heading to right now. And in my opinion, if you want to change the world, you need to know how we got here. So when you understand those key elements, so for example, social changes. The linear economy 200 years ago, we migrated from manufacturing in our homes and in villages into factories. Those factories gave people stable incomes. Stable incomes enabled them to become different types of consumers. Manufacturers moved into mass production because energy allowed them to mechanize things. So we had changes in sources of energy and innovation and invention that led to mechanization. And that mechanization led to mass production. And mass production changed the consumer, and so manufacturers created a different financial system. And that financial system was where people could buy products on credit or on installment payments. So those were the key elements. And the changes that we're seeing now, we're transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And fintech is tapping unbanked. Millions of people still remain outside formal banking systems. So we have so fintech actually allows people who are the unbanked to become part of the financial system. So manufacturing is also changing.
Adriana, can you hear me? We're quite a bit behind.
Sorry?
We're quite a bit behind. Can we give you 60 seconds to wrap up, please?
Okay, all right, sorry, I get carried away. So anyway, if you want to change the world, come and do our foundation course. It'll be ready in the next few days. You can sign up, and as soon as you sign up, as soon as it's finished, we'll send you an email and you can take the course. So that's it.
Adriana, if I could presenters back up on the stage, we'll do a couple of questions really quickly for Q&A.
Is that open to anyone? I might take the second one. Where are you seeing signs of hope? I think maybe it's important to look at this both from a pre-COVID but also post-COVID context. I think pre-COVID, we were seeing a lot of positive progress towards reducing the unnecessary use of single-use plastics across Bangkok. So you saw a lot of the big malls, all the airports, airlines and other sort of communal spaces all shifting away from using single-use plastics. And that was really encouraging to see. I think a lot of the impact of the pandemic has derailed a lot of that positive progress, which is sad. I think throughout, though, from our perspective for precious plastic, we've seen an ongoing capacity and appetite to engage in recycling. So if you give people the tools and you give people the awareness that there is a solution out there, then people will jump at that. And I think that's a really encouraging and hopeful sign that hopefully we'll just keep on growing across Thailand. So we keep on seeing plastic coming through to our workshop and in fact growing as well. So I hope that continues. But again, it's maybe a small drop in the ocean in terms of the amount of single-use plastics which is now being created because of the ongoing pandemic.
I might also pick up on that question, and I think also whilst the pandemic has meant that we've started using more and more single-use plastic again, I think it's also made people reflect on the single-use products that they are using. And I feel like, for example, there is more of a movement towards people, say, trying to use their homemade masks rather than the disposable ones. And I think the other thing that's gaining momentum as well is because social media is becoming so prevalent, and especially amongst younger population groups, it is a lot easier to get traction amongst large population groups to change behaviors. And so, for example, universities are good places to try new approaches, and my office is based in Chulalongkorn University, where they have a great zero waste platform or initiative, and they don't give out any plastic bags. The cups are compostable. Everyone sorts their leftover food waste after lunch, and they have a biodigester to generate energy from the leftover food and so on. And I think when people in their life at work or at university get into these good habits, then they can also translate into their wider life. But that's not to say that there isn't a lot more to do, and it is easy to forget and still get a plastic cup or a single-use cup when you leave the university campus. So I think there needs to be still a larger momentum. And I think also related to this, and maybe just add, I think a lot of the plastic waste issues we see are also related to issues of poverty as well. So the lower your income, the less you can afford to buy in bulk, which means that you might have to buy, for example, sachets of shampoo or small portions of fish sauce or small portions of food. And so you end up generating more waste. So if we can address some of the larger economic issues and social development issues as well, in order that people can transition away from using very small, only being able to afford very small portions to being able to afford to buy in bulk, for example, that can help with that. So it's a bigger problem.
I think I think we're spreading ourselves too thin. I think that we've taken on this whole big thing, and I think we're spreading ourselves too thin. I think that we need to really consider, there's a lot of industrial waste. I think in a good place to start. They have a lot of volume. I think more and more companies, sustainability report. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but we need to, are increasingly looking at sustainability reporting in regards to making investments. So these are key issues, these are key areas. Consumers, they're very, very broad, and consumers are very difficult, market researchers, you can do market research and often you'll come up with different answers. Consumers aren't consistent in their market research. So, we're consumers. I think perhaps we need to tackle them in areas where we have more access to them. And in workplaces is where we have more access to them to be able to create behaviour change. In their homes, it's different.
Thank you, Adriana. In the interest of time, I think we probably need to move on to our next exercise. So please, everyone, join me in thanking our panel for this overview of the problem. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.